Hey everybody, I'm Jason Truding of So Percussion, and this is the Brooklyn Bound podcast. And as some of you may know, we've been talking with folks who are on Brooklyn Bound, and we're pumped. October 8th is our next Brooklyn Bound, and so we'll be playing a piece by Sarah Hennies, and we're going to chat today. Welcome, Sarah.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I'm realizing actually a lot of the people on this Brooklyn Bound are people who I think I'm gonna consider friends now, and we've met over Zoom, and that's so weird
Yeah,
to be
that's
like in,
how that's how friendship works now.
right? It's like you're a Zoom friend.
Yeah,
I've been in the same room to hear your music. I think I may have emailed you sometime after November, hearing your piece at PASIC was so cool. Um, but we didn't get to meet there. So
yeah, I was kind of I may have disappeared shortly
yeah,
afterward.
yeah. Why? Why?
I don't know.
I'm just joking.
I was worn out. I was only there for I flew in the day before and then just like immediately left the next day
Yeah.
after I played, and so it was like kind of a whirlwind,
Is
get
this
home
an
as fast as possible kind of thing.
overwhelming,
Yeah.
overwhelming situation? Yeah. But Tim, mutual friend, did an awesome job of curating that music.
Yeah, it was great.
Um, but it'll be fun to talk about Tim or talk about that music. But I was telling you with these podcasts, I usually go in the same kind of order with the same um, five kind of questions. Oh, actually, I was saying I saw the vibraphone in your background, but I see a bell there too. Is that
Oh, yeah.
that's what that piece was? It was so cool. The bells around the audience worked so good.
Yeah, I have another duo piece called Unsettle that I wrote for Bent Duo that I have to, that bell is out because a tuned bell in that piece, and I have to send Bill Solomon a big box of bells so they
Yeah,
can play that piece later this month.
very specific.
So
It's
we
a
just
specific bell.
mail the bells back and forth every time they play
Nice.
that piece.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. Is that the duo with David, or is it a different duo?
Yeah, yeah.
Piano, but awesome. That's so cool. Um, well, we usually just start somewhat at the beginning, just in terms of learning somewhat what your Cliff Note story is of how you became a composer. I know you most as a composer, I guess, but I would say composer and percussionist. Is that
Yeah, yeah.
yeah? So, what was your path to composition and percussion?
It started with when I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, at a time when there was a very, very bustling like punk and hardcore scene, and fell into playing bands in eighth grade. And then from around age 15, started to get into more weird underground experimental music, but not like, I don't like saying this word, but not like modern classical music or chamber music, but more just sort of, weirdos.
Hmm.
And um, around after my second year of high school, I switched to this performing arts magnet school and met a couple percussionists who were doing more stuff like that. Yeah, like the kind of percussion one studies in college, and also around the same time started discovering more composers. Like I would just go to the record store and just buy stuff from the experimental section. And one day I bought a CD of Xenakis's Pléiade in like, I don't know, 10th grade, because I was like, oh, this is percussion and this guy has a weird name, so this might be good.
This must be cool. Love that.
So I heard Xenakis and John Cage right around the same time in high school. And after that got more serious about playing percussion, because prior to switching to this high school, I didn't even want to go to college. I just was like, I play in bands and I hate school, so that's what I'm going to do.
Was there a main band that you were playing in night, like, or it sounds like multiple bands?
There were two. The first one was called Telephone Man, which ended because the main singer songwriter finished high school,
Right.
who's now like a successful artist named Matthew Ronay, who's in New York City,
Oh, cool.
who we've become reacquainted on Twitter, but I haven't actually heard from in like 20 years.
Mm.
And then I was in another one with some other friends called Nero, that was kind of a weird post-hardcore. I wouldn't say math rock, but just weirdo, noisy rock. And then I guess I've played in bands somewhat consistently, not now, but up until a few years ago, I was off and on in some kind of band. But as the years went on, I was in the same band in Austin for 10 years called the Weird Weeds. But in that
That's
10
a really good
years,
name.
yeah,
Yeah.
in that 10 years, there started to be less and less band stuff and more of my own music. Um, so, I mean, I've been making my own music since I was 15, but when I went to college, I studied percussion at University of Illinois, and then I studied percussion. I did a master's at UC San Diego. So I was always making my own music that whole time, but what I was really serious about in college was being a percussionist.
Hmm.
And then I was playing in this band, and then around 2009, or maybe a little before that, mid 2000s, I started really seriously making my own music, um, usually just for myself or recordings. And then as the years went by, I started to get more requests from other people, which I'm doing a lot now.
Hmm. That's
So,
awesome. And where is Austin in the mix? So Illinois, San
oh,
Diego.
yeah, I went Illinois, San Diego, and then I moved to Austin because my partner at the time wanted to go to grad school there.
Oh,
And
cool.
then we really liked it there, so I stayed there for a really long time. And then moved to Ithaca because the same partner got a job at Cornell. And I've been here ever since because I really like it here.
Nice. And we have a connection. We both teach at Bard, but I drive up from south of Bard. I guess you make the trek from Ithaca.
Yeah, it's long, but the job is really great. And
Yeah.
as it turns out, it's very timely that I took that job because I was self-employed for a couple of years prior to that as a
Yeah.
musician, and now, like, as everything is canceled.
And
So
having some home base or some that's so meaningful.
had I not taken that job, I would just be royally screwed financially
Yeah,
right
totally right.
now.
You know, me actually, my partner Beth, we got married in Ithaca. We went to
Oh, cool.
school in Rochester, New York, and at Eastman, and then lived in Brooklyn for a while. But she would still go up, and she's a violist and hang with her teacher up there. And we would always camp in Ithaca.
Right.
And I had some buddies at Eastman. We would go down and camp. You know, it just felt like such a we had to choose some place to get married, and I don't know why we just drove there and did it on a campground. But
I
there's
mean,
a lot of cool camping and hiking and
yeah, the nature here is amazing, and it's a real easy place to live. And we live a mile from town, but it feels like we live in the country. So
right.
we have the benefits of living amongst nature without having to be far away from, grocery stores and restaurants and stuff.
Right. And there's a music scene I know. I mean, through both the colleges, right? There's I mean, I think I know a few musicians doing cool things there. So
Yeah, there's stuff at the colleges, and then there's a group called Ithaca Underground that books all of the like punk and hip hop shows and occasional experimental shows in town that I was involved with for a few years, but had to leave the board because I just couldn't, I didn't have the time anymore. But
right.
Ithaca Underground was really, really great.
Oh, very cool. And I want to get this is a nice trajectory you're painting, getting us to now. But in Louisville, I'm trying to think of my friend Drew Daniel. I don't know if you know Drew Daniel of
Oh yeah, we're
ensembles. He's like,
friends.
yeah, okay. I was just thinking like as you were telling your story of like Louisville underground experimental bands, not modern content. Like I felt like Drew would have a similar
Yeah,
paint a similar picture of his high school moment.
I didn't actually meet him until, I don't know, several years ago. I played a show in Baltimore, and Drew was there. But I knew who he was from high school because he was the like generation of Louisville bands before mine, because
Nice.
I think he's maybe a little less than 10 years older than me,
I think
but
that
just
makes sense. Yeah.
like a slightly different generation of Louisville bands. But yeah, we met in Baltimore, and I became friends with him and Martin and really like them a lot.
Yeah, good people. I don't. I think so. I'm not even sure we've really played Louisville. I think we played. We were talking about Basic. I think we did a Basic in Louisville. That's been
Oh
our only
yeah,
experience. I'm not sure we've played in other spots in Kentucky, but I feel like Louisville has something going on that you need to
yeah, for sure.
tap into. Um, well, very cool. So, but I do want to talk about what we're doing on Brooklyn Bound, but just in a more broad sense. You're talking about making more and more music with other folks asking you to make music. Um, so I know of some of the percussion music you've been writing. I think I also first started to know about your work through Tim Feeney. I think you guys do some playing together or did some playing together?
Yeah, we
Um,
have a trio together since, like, God, I don't know, 8 years ago, with me and Tim and Greg Stewart have a trio called Meridian that plays improvised music. And I've had some kind of relationship with improvised music for forever,
mm,
but got really tired of doing it quite a while ago. But I still do it with Greg and Tim because it's such a long collaboration at this
mhm.
point that, like, it's become something really, really interesting to me other than just sort of one-off
Right.
you know, not to knock improvised music. I understand why people do it, but
Yeah.
it's just not my thing.
It's
Um,
cool though. I mean, it sounds like that it's like it transcends, you know, like if it wasn't for that group of people, it seems like you're saying, oh, I could leave this behind, but that improvising connection is so real that it feels.
yeah, and I mean, I don't have that much opportunity to collaborate with people, and definitely not over that long amount of time. But we've gotten together at least once a year since like probably, I don't know, 2008 or some. No, maybe not quite that long. But oh, I don't remember. A while
Yeah,
ago.
solid time. Solid time. Yeah, I feel like sometimes I think about my vibe, like playing in bands in my undergrad and that kind of thing, and then when I think of what I do now, it's easy to say like I'm doing something way different. And then when you were talking about like you played in these bands and then you kind of stopped playing in bands, it feels like it just depends on how we talk about it, right? Because it's just the band you have with Greg and Tim seems very weird compared to some of the band, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
like what's an ensemble and what's a band or whatever, but just the idea of making music with people. um but so more and more you're writing for other people to play. Has that
yeah.
been?
The past, I don't know how long. I got asked by a really great Chilean guitar player named Christian Alvear to write a solo guitar piece um, several years ago, and I really wanted to do it, obviously, just because I wanted to do it. But I also thought that by doing that, people would see that this was something that they could have. Because I think up to that point, I had really only written music for myself because I wasn't pursuing, like competitions, or I wasn't pursuing commissions. I just was doing my own thing in hopes that one day it would grow into something more than that because I wanted to be, I wanted to write music for other people just because I wanted to do stuff that I can't do by myself.
Mm.
And that ended up totally working. That after I did that guitar piece, I can't say it's the only reason, but it's the first commission. Well, not the first, but the first commission that I did that was really like for someone else that I was not involved in musically, other than as the composer. And then, but also like my opportunities were just increasing around that time anyway. So it was just kind of a combination of having done this piece for Christian and also just me having been working for a really long time to try to like build the thing that I do now.
And when was that commission?
I think it was around 2010. I've my memory for dates
Yeah,
is
I
really
know.
bad. If
Me too. I actually apologize for asking that question because I'm so terrible at past dates.
it doesn't feel like a long time ago, but I think it actually probably was.
Right. Yeah. 10 year. We're in the 10-year range of time ago. Does that feel right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh wait, here I found it. It was 2016, so
Oh,
not that
nice.
long.
Okay, good, good,
Four,
good.
four,
4 or 5 year
yeah,
range.
4 to 5 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So that's amazing. Actually, that's a lot. A lot. I feel like a lot has happened for you compositionally in that amount of time.
Yeah, for sure. It's
That's
been, yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I was able to quit my job 3 years ago or so.
Mm,
So like things I wouldn't say they blew up, but the the thing that I wanted to happen started to happen,
mm.
that I had just been working for so long by myself, and making records and playing shows, that I hoped would eventually lead to more, which it ended up happening, which is great.
That's amazing. I think I'm really psyched and grateful to make this connection that So is able to play our first piece of yours. I also think it's kind of wild and funny that it's happening in this way. Like what
Yeah.
I associate with your music, I think we talked about this the other day, like the experiences I've had hearing it live have so much to do with kind of sitting in a place long enough to have a new sonic kind of acoustic phenomenon happening and have an experience that feels very um, personal, and being in the room feels really important in a lot of
Yeah, yeah.
ways with the percussion music of yours that I know. um, and then thinking about what music makes sense to play in this world that we're in right now, discovering that you have this other piece that kind of does make sense in this world
Yeah.
has been exciting. So we're playing piece called Everything Else on the Brooklyn Bound show. Do you want to talk about that piece at all, or even just what that piece is in relation to some of the other percussion music you've been writing? Or
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, it is kind of an anomaly, I guess, for well, the reasons that you just said, but also just stylistically. Well, I don't know. it feels related to my practice, but it is a very different kind of piece where I don't even know where to start. it was it was written as kind of like the anti-percussion piece because I was thinking a lot about what being a percussionist actually means in terms of identity.
Mm,
And Steve Schick, my old teacher, wrote a lot about how like percussionists are the only people that don't have an instrument. Um, and so yeah, I forget exactly how Steve phrased it, but basically saying that percussionists play a collection of instruments instead of a single instrument, which is true. But when I thought about that a little more deeply, I was like, well, actually, percussionists in the context of new music could be asked to do basically anything. That, like, I mean, the number of crazy things I've done in the course of playing pieces is, a really wide range of stuff and things that definitely fall outside of the category of like striking objects.
right.
And so I started to think that actually what a percussionist is not someone that plays an assemblage of objects, but that someone who has the ability to just decide who they are on their own.
Mm,
Um, because like, I have this kind of essay performance piece with a bunch of bells that I did where it starts with me improvising on all these little bells, like the one in the background. And at the very beginning of the essay, I say like, what I'm doing right now is technically percussion playing. And I could only do this forever and still technically be called a percussionist,
mm,
which is true. You could only bow cardboard and still
right.
be called a percussionist. And so, uh, knowing that, I saw a connection between percussion and like queer identity, because, and this is where the title Everything Else comes from, because queer doesn't say what you are, because there's no singular definition of queer in the same way that I think there's no singular definition of percussionist. And so everything else is that queer is like not straight. That's basically the meaning of queer. So it says what you're not, but not what you are. And so I think of queer and also the practice of percussion as being everything else. There's cello, there's violin, there's flute, there's tuba, and then there's everything else.
Right,
Uh,
right, right.
so that's where the title came from. And so the piece is written for quote unquote non-musical objects. So, and the performers are free to choose these objects on their own, but they're told to choose to choose an action with an object that's not considered an instrument that produces sound. So like ejecting staples from a stapler, or moving coins from one bowl to another, tearing pages of paper out of a notebook, that kind of thing. Um, and then it's played in this kind of goofy way, where there's not really any like personal expression at all. um, and so it has this kind of jokey quality to it, because part of me was just trying to test the limits of like what one could consider to be music.
Mm,
And
yeah.
then but then I saw a performance of it in Atlanta a couple of years ago, and it gave me a really different idea of the piece, where I was like, oh, this piece is utopian, where like you have all these people together doing exactly what they want,
Mm,
um, and they're interacting with each other just because they're happening at the same time, and it creates some kind of like harmony that's akin to nature, where lots of things are happening at the same time that aren't necessarily connected. And so this happens to me all the time, where I write a piece and I think it's one thing, and then time passes and what it what it actually is becomes more complicated for me, which I really like.
Yeah, that feels like, yeah, that feels like a goal almost in a lot of
Yeah,
music.
yeah.
I imagine for it to become more complex or more layers to reveal themselves.
Well, I've definitely done things that subconsciously had a broader or like more pointed meaning than I thought they did when I made them. Um, but so I'm more conscious of that now. So I kind of, in the past couple of years, I've started doing things that I don't necessarily have a reason to be doing them. Like, it used to be I needed some kind of very rigorous, clear-cut concept before I wrote any notes. And now I just kind of, at least not in every case, but I'll just do stuff and be like, well, I'll figure out what this is later. But I thought of it, so it has something to do with my identity
Mm,
because it came out of me. And then I just sort of figure out later what it is.
yeah, that's nice. I mean, we definitely, the story you tell of percussion playing, um, I mean, so percussion definitely, I think, has that experience of, I mean, so often, I think the task-based thing, which is, I think, often is kind of what you're asking and everything else in a lot of ways, is something that feels like there's almost a lineage of in a weird way in percussion playing. But then there's been these memorable situations where we've been on stage, maybe in slightly more like conservative chamber music circles, and some audience member will come up and be like, "You're not allowed to play that. It's your name says so percussion." You know, like
Right.
we kind of like pigeonholed ourselves with that in our name. But like I remember one time it was like one of those stylophones, you know?
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know, you right, like the
yeah.
um I think we had got one actually from Matmos at first, and it made
Oh,
its way
cool.
into another piece, and an audience member came up and was just like, "That's not a percussion instrument," you know, and it was just like, "What?" Like, how is that some important identifier for you?
Right.
Um, where so oftentimes those things come into our practice without thinking twice about them because they always have historically almost in classical music, you know.
Right.
Um, I think, you know, Adam always talks about the Gershwin horns or whatever, you know, like you don't
Yeah,
ask
yeah.
the horn player to play them or whatever. But I love that. Yeah, I love hearing you talk about what that title means and how to define it. It's strangely soothing and wonderful to play. And you um, so the only other thing that happens in the piece is these like these pitch maker like harmonicas or whistles or like those kind of things,
Yeah.
which are I find strangely important because as we're all just doing our tasks, it feels like a really nice sound world to me. And then as soon as something comes in that feels a little bit more musical, to me, when that leaves, then I start to hear everything else differently somehow.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that was your intention or.
I'm sure that was in there somewhere. I mean, that's something I've done a lot where like you have a constant thing, and then all of a sudden this completely unrelated things comes from out of nowhere, and I mean, it does a lot of things. It kind of it changes what you think is possible in a piece of music. Like I've talked a lot about managing people's expectations, where if you do something just completely out of nowhere in a piece, then it leaves people with the feeling of like, well, what else could happen to me?
Mm,
As opposed to, you know, I use the example of Psycho, the Hitchcock movie, all the
mhm,
time, where I was reading some film notes about Psycho and how Psycho was the first instance of like in the middle of a film, you're watching one film and then all of a sudden you're watching another film, and
mhm,
that it was this complete like rupture of expectations because, you know, who kills the main character in their movie,
right.
um, which is what happens, and then it becomes another movie, and so
Mm,
it I think about that a lot in the same way where I, you know, I have this snare drum piece that's just a 23-minute long snare drum roll with sine waves, and then from out of nowhere there's these like screeching strings 15 minutes in, and then they go away and they never come back, but it leaves you wondering like, is that going to happen again?
right,
Like
right, totally. Oh, that's very cool. I haven't thought about it in those terms, but that's a cool way to think about it. Well, we're really pumped to play this piece. It'll be nice. So's not even really been in the same room as each other much
yeah,
these days. So once we are, it'll be really cool. You have so much really interesting percussion work out there. This is, but I've seen on the interwebs and
yeah.
Instagram. I've seen other, you know, other folks are playing this piece now too, because it feels like it makes sense in this context.
Yeah,
Um,
this piece has been played a lot. It's really surprised me because when I was making it, I remember I was in a rehearsal in Atlanta watching them play, and I just this feeling came over me of just like, what is wrong with me? Like why is this my life? Like why is this the thing that I chose to do? Because the piece is like kind of ridiculous, but at the same time is like you said, is like kind of soothing and
Yep.
nice, and yeah, so I don't know. I have been surprised that of all pieces that was the one that has like, not that I haven't had other pieces that people are playing, but it
Sure.
just has really surprised me that people have continued to play this piece, because to me it was just like anti-music.
It's the sleeper hit, you know, it's a
Totally.
sleeper single.
Yeah.
Um, well, in some ways, this leads me to another question, which is just that, you know, like this moment of music making just, you know, feels unlike any other, you know, like, and I'm so conscious. I know you have a child as well. I've been trying to figure out how to talk to my kids. They're a little older, I think, just about like this moment, and having no context for this moment, for them, that's really scary to think that their parent doesn't know what's going on, like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so just this moment of like, what does it mean to be an artist or to make music in this moment of COVID? And then adding on this layer a few months into COVID of, a larger consciousness of the Black Lives Matter movement, and that conversation in our circles, and what it means to be an artist with both of those things on our minds. Like, it's just, for me, led to really interesting conversations with other artists, just in terms of how are you thinking about your practice right now, and has it, have you thought about it in a different way? Is the music you're writing now, does it feel different in any way, or has your practice been somehow grounding and, some place to go back to outside of these conversations? Or what does it mean to you right now? Like, how are you thinking about it?
Well, I've been really lucky that I still have some like commission work for other people that I'm working on. So it's not that I have nothing to do, which I felt that way in like March and April, where I was just like, God, I just went from like a really bustling career and teaching to doing nothing,
Yeah.
which was really, really hard for me because I don't really ever stop working. I just, I mean, I have a limit, which I have certainly hit before,
Right.
but I don't really stop doing stuff ever, and so that was really hard for me. And then, like, I started to have more stuff to work on from a composing standpoint, and that softened the blow a little bit. But the absence of live music has been really, really sad for me. I mean, I've been performing consistently, regularly since I was 13 years old, and I'm 41 now, and um, I don't know, I was talking to Tim Feeney about this, and he was like, yeah, it feels like you lost an arm. And it just feels like I lost something like really important in my life, which is very, very hard. But I don't know. I don't have anything super insightful to say, except I'm just trying to like get through it and hope that I don't know if, any kind of like normal as we once knew it is going to come back, but at least that like we will find some way to have, people gather again.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said earlier, so much of my music is like, I wouldn't say it's dependent on being in the room with it, but the full experience of it is a lot different in person. And I mean, it's planned that way, it's written that way.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. It's just hard, and then I hope it will become less hard. But fortunately, between teaching and composing, I'm not just sort of sitting at home twiddling my thumbs. But
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
I
weird
don't
to
know.
go, like, whatever work, the idea of writing or the idea of playing, it also feels like it can be a kind of respite or something grounding,
Yeah, yeah,
um yeah, I think I had that feeling with where I feel like in a lot of ways, I mean, we record a ton, and I love recording with I love recording other projects, I love that medium. But I feel like over the last 3 or 4 years, like, has almost thought about ourselves more and more as a live group, like the idea of gathering and experiencing something together has felt more and more important, and something we've been thinking about more and more. And so it almost felt like, whoa, when all of that got pulled out, when that becomes not possible anymore, just kind of reframing what it means to make music right now is,
yeah,
it's a useful thing to think about. But yeah, I almost think like I was blindsided a little bit, because I had been feeling more and more import on the idea of sharing something together in a space,
yeah, yeah.
um well, what the last question of all these um discussions have been a little bit about that, just in terms of like some kind of memory of a, this is maybe the cheesiest question of the of the five, but just some kind of like concert memory, because I know, in some silly way, but I almost feel like from the beginning, even like when Tim was in, so way back at the beginning, you get in a van, you go travel around and play shows, and then you have these shared experiences, and those become, as you're driving, 5 hours from Chicago to wherever, you're kind of, those are the shared stories of the band or something,
Yeah.
so I feel like has. And oftentimes these stories for us are the, all the shit that went wrong, or just like the kind of like the sad stories, but like us getting through some weird concert. But some of them are also the super happy, fun shows, whether it's somewhere fancy or whether it's a coffee shop, whatever it is, those kind of shared stories. Like, do you have some story of either, you know a concert experience with a band of yours, or with your trio, or some really memorable experience of somebody else playing your music, um, there would be something to share to take us out.
Well, I will say generally, as someone who's played a lot of shows with, less than 10 people in the audience, that
Yeah.
I've just, no matter how bad the situation is, with very few exceptions, I always find playing thrilling in some way. Um, there are certain exceptions to that where it was just really horrible in a way that was out of my control. But but I have the same thrill about performing that I did when I was a teenager. Um, but I don't know. I have a lot of stories like that. The first one that comes to mind is that I played the Audition Festival in Stockholm a few years ago, and on the way there, I was having just this like horrible muscle pain that was like, it wasn't sciatica, but it was kind of like sciatica, where unless I was laying down, I just had this like horrible, horrible muscle cramp in my leg.
Oh man.
And that like it like hurt to walk. It hurt to do anything except lay down. And so I was on a, transatlantic flight with this happening.
Oh.
And then I went to play and I played this piece of mine, Gather and Release, that's an hour-long vibraphone and pre-recorded tape music, that is a really physically intense thing to play. And I remember right before I played, because I don't play for the first few minutes of the piece because there's this field recording playing, and I was standing there with like one leg off the ground, like, how on earth am I going to get through this?
Yeah.
And then as soon as I started playing, I just forgot about it. Like,
Uh,
I played for an hour, and if I mean, it's impossible to pick, but I mean, in my mind, it became probably, what, if not the very favorite, one of my favorite shows I've ever played, where it just, it was a packed house. I played really, really well. People really liked it. Everybody was really nice. The festival was really great. Like, it just was, other than this one horrible physical thing,
yeah.
it was a really amazing experience.
Well, it also sounds like the act of all the adrenaline and the act of playing the music also helped get past the pain for a second,
Oh,
which is,
definitely.
yeah, pretty amazing.
And then
Um,
the other one is that I have this piece called Contralto for seven musicians in a film that got premiered in New York City, and I had agreed to do this, where I like, Issue Project Room wanted me to do something, and my friend Bob that invited me, it was like, well, what would you want to do? And this was in the summer, and I was like, well, I have this film thing I'm working on, but like, it's probably going to be more trouble than you're going to want to go to put on. And he was like, no, that sounds great. And at that time I had done like next to nothing to make this piece, and so ended up busting my ass to like, I had to film seven people, edit a film, which I had never done before, and then write an hour of music. And I had to write an hour of music knowing that I was only going to get 1 4-hour rehearsal the day
yeah.
of the show, because
Uh,
I got some grants to make this piece, and I flew in all of my friends to play it because I needed people that I could trust to just do it.
yeah.
And so it was just this really harrowing experience. And then as a composer, it definitely was the most amazing thing I've ever experienced, where it was just like, again, like, great audience, and just, I don't, just one of the best memories that I'll ever have of something that I did. It just was like really shocking. And I was kind of aware that I had done something that was really good and just really personally important. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like what you said, I'm not, none of us know. I mean, the idea of going back to normal doesn't really feel like the thing, but the idea of being able to have concert experiences does feel, does feel hopeful.
yeah.
Um, you saying the number of shows you played for less than 10 people just reminded me of one show. Um, I do improvise some with a friend of mine, Cenk Ergun, and we were just playing. I live in Princeton. We were playing at the coffee shop here, and it's one of those things where they have folks play every Saturday or something, but like what we were playing is not coffee shop vibe.
Yeah.
But we were doing our thing, and there were a couple of people there. And I have a problem with whenever I'm improvising, I just close my eyes. That's how I improvise, as opposed to
Right.
when I'm playing chamber music. I'm very much eyes open. So I just have my eyes closed for like an hour. you know, and it went from the 10 people that were in the coffee shop to like, we opened our eyes an hour later and like we had just like everybody was gone, you know. It was like that. Very memorable experience for the two of us. But you know, just clear it out. Clear
Yeah,
it
I
out.
was joking with a friend a while back that was like, "Are you really an experimental musician if you haven't been thrown out of a bar?"
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe just in Princeton, everybody was nice. They should have thrown us out and kept the customers, but they just let the customers leave. Maybe that's
Yeah,
yeah.
I have been screamed at by a bartender before in a very, very funny, but not to them evening.
Where was that?
It was in Austin. That it was at this bar called Headhunters, which is uh, I don't even know if it's still open, but was historically shows were always free there, so the quality of music was usually like pretty low, and it just was this like just total like butt rock club of just terrible
Did you say butt rock?
butt rock of just terrible hard rock bands.
Nice.
And my friend Brian was like, "Yeah, my friend's planning a show at Headhunters, and they want to have us play." We had this like not noise, but like electronic duo. And I was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. And Brian was like, no, they said they're trying to branch out. And so we came in, and 5 minutes into this set, this bartender, who was a huge guy with a long beard and a ponytail and a leather jacket, just started screaming and was just like, "This needs to end now." And one of us was playing a laptop, and he screamed, "That ain't music, it's just a hard drive." And my bandmate at the time was there, and he said it was like something out of a Pee Wee Herman movie.
Nice. That's true. You
So
have, yeah.
we wrapped it up and got the hell out of there,
Yeah.
because I was like sure that we were going to get beat up.
I
But
feel like you do have to have that experience. Those
yeah.
feel like important experiences. Well, thank you. You shared extra. You get extra credit. So we got 3 or 4 stories out of you, which is really good.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. I'm very pumped for October 8th. Everybody can tune in. Usually, those of us we usually watch it on our YouTube channel, and it's fun to kind of chat in. So, Sarah, if you're not doing anything, 7 p.m.
I'll be there.
You'll be there. You'll be there chatting it up.
Yeah.
It's weird. The collective listening thing through chat is somewhat. I find it important somehow right now, even though it's a really weird way to take things in. Just knowing that people are taking something in at the same time is comforting.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you for writing this piece of music. Thanks for hanging with us and letting us play your piece of music. And thanks for this conversation. It was really fun.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for playing the piece too.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to hear what you came up with.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. No, I think we got good stuff.
Hard to mess up.
Awesome. Well, have a good week. I'll see you next week.
All right. Yeah, great.
All right. Take
Thanks.
it easy. See ya.